no repolarization. So this is repol and repol. What happens initially, you still have a good ST segment, tall peaked T wave. What eventually happens if hyperkalemia continues, then we will lose the integrity of this right angle turn. And it will become slurry. And then, as time goes by, it will slur on both sides. And what ends up happening is we create, because we lose all the integrity of our waveforms and segments. And this is called a sine wave, S-I-N-E. It's like you would see on a sonar where you're wow, wow. And so it's, you've lost all the integrity. You've lost all those right angle turns. Segments are always supposed to be straight. QRSs and Ts and Ps are supposed to be up and down. When they start to slur together, then you lose the ability to rest, to fire, to reset and return to rest. Okay? So who's at risk for hyperkalemia? Anybody who is at risk for acidosis. Renal patients. Post-shock trauma patients. People who have had compartment syndrome, crush syndrome. My mother, and I talk about my mother a lot in the classrooms because she is a medical train wreck, but she's great educational fodder. And my mother is a diabetic. She's 84 years old. She's in an assisted, well, not assisted, she's in a nursing facility right now and will be for the rest of her life. But she's been a diabetic for a couple decades now, type 2 diabetes. Great lifestyle as a young married woman and mother and stuff, and we got to travel a lot. So she used to have an insulin pump because she just couldn't stay regulated. Because of her diabetes, she has neuropathy in both feet and cannot feel either foot, yet neuropathy creates tremendous pain. So when somebody says they can't feel their feet, don't associate that with being painless. Neuropathy hurts a lot. Sharp stabbing pains. But I could take a needle and put it through and through my mother's foot and she would never know I did it unless she saw me do it. So it's quite a dichotomy. Then, because of that, because of the diabetes, she has 23% renal function, total renal function. So what do you think her blood plasma is constantly going to be? Acidotic or alkaline? Acidotic. She also, because of the neuropathy, cannot walk unassisted. So you sit all day in a chair. You're in renal failure. Your muscles don't work as well, like your urinary muscles. So do you think she ever truly empties her bladder? So all the sediment sits in the base of the bladder. What do you think that does to the bladder? It erodes it, correct? Which again, then throws you into infections, which does what to your blood sugar? So you see where people can get into these turmoils. So there's multiple mechanisms by which you can develop acidosis, yet you're simply watching TV at a nursing home. And so 9 pills a day of sodium bicarb. It's her least favorite thing to take of all of her meds, because you have to chew them. So if you can imagine Arm & Hammer, yeah. And so 3 pills every meal. But she gets hyperkalemic. And so we have to watch her potassium levels. When you have an acidotic environment, think about the bilayer phospholipid cell membrane called the plasma membrane. It's made up of a lipid. What do you think happens when you apply acid to a lipid? It'll dissolve it, won't it? So the integrity of the cell wall breaks down. So what is constantly leaking out in greater quantities than you and I? Potassium. And so what does that put her at risk for? Hyperkalemia. Understand? Okay. So hyperkalemia, our treatments should include shoring up the cell wall so it doesn't collapse totally. Because once it's collapsed totally, it's a dead cell. So we want to try to stabilize the cell membrane, and we do this by calcium chloride. That doesn't fix hyperkalemia, it stabilizes the cell membrane. Then, the other thing we need to do is we need to try to get the potassium as much as we can back into the cell, because he's the chief intracellular cation, so that we can resume firing, resetting, rest. Firing, resetting, rest. We need insulin and glucose and oxygen to get the sodium-potassium pump guys to get them across the cell wall. Any extra K pluses, any extra, and or in conjunction with sodium bicarbonate, we can control the acidosis, get it to the kidneys, and then hopefully get it flushed out. That's how we fix hyperkalemia. And that's why we do what we do. So calcium chloride, insulin D50, sodium bicarbonate. Now in my mother's case, they would have to then dialyze her because she wouldn't be able to process it as well herself. You guys okay on your acid base? Good. All right. That's my time with you. Like an hour and a half over, but.